Forbes Books presents Sustainable Leadership and Disruptive Growth with David Radlow. Transformation for a new and better world. Here's David.
My guest this week is Melanie Velde, a visionary leader pioneering real common sense practical solutions to our world's greatest sustainability challenges, while enhancing and not sacrificing growth. As the founder of Big Tree Global, Mel has empowered business leaders across the globe and students with groundbreaking insights on tackling climate change, pollution, poverty, and social inequity. In her new book, Lead Like a Genius, Mel takes us on an inspirational journey to outgrow the competition while transforming to a new and better world. Melanie, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Dave. Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Delightful. Melanie, we're going to take a deep dive into your extraordinary book, Lead Like a Genius, so our listeners have an opportunity here to view on certain key points. You cite UN Global and PwC as 99% of CEOs believe sustainability is important. The future growth, purpose-driven bands, and experience valuations of 175% more. Companies grow 3 times faster. You even cited Unilever going in the mainstream. After 2010, their stock has grown by 33%, outperforming many others. You also cite some that fail to tie sustainability into a business model, and then, they're doomed to failure. You also say genius leaders look at problems in a unique way as you focus on, for example, sustainability goals and no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, and gender equality, along with clean water and sanitation. Why is it so important to tie sustainability into business models in order to achieve success?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Dave. Great question and great summary also. Yeah. You touched on some really good points there. I would say what you see a lot is companies that want to do something, right? It's like for several reasons, people have different motivations. It's either they realize the impact they have indirectly with their business. Yeah, obviously, like Interface's founder, Ray Anderson, very much had that spear in the chest moment where he realized. Or sometimes it comes from my staff want us to make more of a difference. My customers want it, but what do we do? And you see a lot of companies that don't really build sustainability into their business model, but it's more a separate, thinking of giving back. And often that leads to not very effective outcomes. So you see many initiatives that deal more with the symptoms of the issues. It doesn't tend to really make a structural, long-lasting difference. But also what is a shame is that I feel it goes in hand. Those that make much more lasting, effective impact on the issues that we face as humanity also tend to get much more significant competitive advantages in terms of some of the benefits that you touched on there, getting that growth, because customers become more loyal. They talk about your company. If you are really good at this stuff, you're more attractive to talented staff. And these benefits don't always materialize. People don't get that excited about compliance with legislation or by not being very effective or not being very authentic. So it very much matters how you do it, in terms of the impact, but also the commercial benefits you're going to gain. And those that build it into their business model, that tends to be a lot more effective.
Okay, let's focus in first on impact, as you mentioned it. You're a believer in people and businesses can drive impact in-house, supply chain, and a wider context. How do you do that in the plan and simply execute? Use, for example, best outcomes.
Yeah, so there are so many ways. That's the thing is I think often people don't realize how many opportunities there are to really make a difference with their business. I think it's often good just to give you a few examples just to make it more concrete. So imagine as a company, you want to make a difference to, let's say, poverty, if we're talking about that kind of more people aspect. So you'll see a lot of companies, you're looking at those United Nations SDGs, no poverty, no hunger, health and well-being. So what are we going to do? And it's not strange. And I've been in those shoes myself, working on programs in the Kibera slum in Nairobi. Just particularly when you think about children, you want to make donations. If kids are in the slum and they have no shoes, it can be fatal for them, right? They have a wound, no antibiotics in case they end up with an infection. And yeah, it can be fatal. So you'll see examples where companies want to fundraise, make donations. You have like a Warby Parker, donate a pair of glasses for each pair you buy. A Tom Shoes who donate a pair of shoes for a pair that you buy. But if you then look at a very different example of Soul Rebels, founded by Ethiopian businesswoman Bethlehem Tillahun, one of Africa's fastest growing footwear brands, and she asked this question, and I think it's very good, captures it really well. If you give a child a pair of shoes and it grows out of it or it wears out of it, then what does it have? But if you give parents a job, the whole family will always have shoes. And not just shoes, because that's the other thing sometimes with giving, donations is you might not give people the right stuff. They might actually need money for a school uniform, or they might need money for antibiotics. And so empowering people with jobs and also then, what those jobs are like. So Soul Rebels pays people 3 times the industry average wage. That can have a real structural impact. And that was one thing when I switched from kind of working in the tech sector to running these programs in the Kibera slum. That was one thing that became for me crystal clear, is that if we want to solve poverty, the kind of people issues in the world, who is actually best placed to fix this long term? Who has the power to empower people? It's actually businesses. And when they do it well, it can genuinely go with more commercial success. So like you see it with the Tony's Chocolonely in the Netherlands. So what they do is if you think about child labor, so, most of the cocoa in the world is produced in West Africa. And there's a really high ratio of those farms where there's child labor, with the root cause being poverty. And they have changed the model by paying not just kind of fair prices, but much, much better than that, much more based on actually what are the just prices to pay. And it's tackling child labor, but also poverty at its root. And at the same time, it's one of the fastest growing companies in this sector. It's now number 1 in the Netherlands. Is increasing rapidly in the UK, many other European countries, and is also making its way into the US market also now. So you see that the two can go hand in hand, but it depends very much. Indeed, is it an integrated part of your business model? That's one thing. Are you tackling the root cause of the issue? Are you dealing with symptoms? I would say that's one other major factor.
As you're focusing along with the empowering and you're focusing locally and globally, could you comment a bit on some of the pitfalls that you need to look out for?
Yeah, so I would say one major pitfall is that sometimes then when you see initiatives or businesses that are completely focused on making a difference, is that they forget about the commercial value. And that's also the title of the book, Lead Like a Genius. But why that title, and I think why that's so crucial as a point, is that research shows that our brains are wired that when we are confronted with opposites, we struggle to see both. We want to see one or we want to see the other. Albert Rothenberg at Harvard did a study actually to find out like what made geniuses of their time so exceptional, whilst there were many other talented musicians or artists at the time. So why was an Einstein so different? Why was a Mozart or Picasso so much more superior to other people with a high IQ or talent? And that's exactly what he found is what they did differently. They pursued the unity of two opposites as part of a whole. It's that yin and yang, that Eastern symbol, the pursuit of the unity of opposites. And it's really interesting once you know that. There's so many things I come across in life, but very much with sustainability also is that we want to see one or the other. If we see an impact business, a business that tries to do good, we almost think that making profit shouldn't really be part of the equation anymore. And similarly, when we see a profit-oriented business, there can be an element of sustainability, but it's a secondary thing. We struggle to see both as part of a whole. And that is one of the most dangerous pitfalls. If you then look at initiatives, and just to give you again maybe an example, I was talking to a lady here who has set up an initiative who try to bring mothers who have been out of work for a while, after having children, and to support them going back to work. And I asked her, I said, well, so essentially you're a recruitment company, coaching and recruitment company. So are you charging a fee to those companies? And she said, no, of course not. We have a social impact purpose. And so we rely on government funding. But what you see is then that lack on making a profit tends to lead to a lack of focus on the value of these people. And if a woman is of really high value for, to be recruited by a company, why wouldn't they pay? And if it's not of value enough, then is she actually doing a good job? And then you can also question what then tends to happen. Something that I've found very much with my research is that they have lower success rates also then in terms of getting people into work, who stay in work and who progress with their careers. And if you compare that to an example that very much leads like a genius, there's a company in the Netherlands called C Talent. They make sure that the companies that they work with really need the specific talents of those people. So, for example, people who are deaf tend to have a better eye for detail. And so what you see is that they've matched them up, for example, in forensics, where that's an important thing. People who are blind tend to be better at listening. So they've matched them up at roles at the police, for example, where they're tapping suspect conversations, or who are very good at service-oriented roles, since they're very good listeners. Because she does that so well, she doesn't just charge a recruitment fee, but she charges more than the average recruitment company. And by doing that, their success rate is 80-90%, because she very much has that focus on the commercial value of her recruits. Companies will come back for more candidates. So they'll come back and say, have you got another candidate for me? Because they're doing so well. And not just that they're doing so well, they're adding so much value to my business, but they see all the other benefits that come with having someone with a disability in their company. And it's a very different approach. And it's why she's so successful in terms of people from a background of not being able to get into work, doing exceptionally well, working as a forensics consultant at PwC, for example, progressing into partnership roles. But she's also doubling her turnover each year because of having that commercial value for her clients. So it's really that is making sure you do both, the commercial value and the impact.
Okay, yeah, commercial value and impact as you're solving the problem. That ties really into your next stage, which is really the 4 pillars. It is the recognition that since the Industrial Revolutions, we've had some issues. Your hard-fast belief in Adam Smith, which is really interesting. And then you just laid out your need to pursue the profits. And then you also talk a little bit about good versus bad profits. Would you mind going through your 4 pillars in that way? It's a real interesting approach on how to view sustainability.
Yeah, so I mean, the four pillars is very much what you'll see in the book is the impact wheel. So really trying to make it very simple. If you are facing these key global issues, the 17 SDGs, if you actually really look at it from a business perspective, where you can really tackle the issues most effectively, it is really those 4 areas. So that's where that impact wheel, those 4 pillars are based on. And the book talks about different types of examples, initiatives you can undertake in each of those 4 areas. The good versus bad profits. So it ties in very much with, what we just spoke about, that keeping that focus on the commercial value. And Adam Smith, how it actually really intended free market economies to work is by having these 2 things hand in hand. So if you look at the 4 pillars in the impact wheel, so really tackling climate change, pollution, the plastics crisis, poverty and everything at its root, it's a matter of justice. It's not about philanthropy. Actually, if you really drill it down, and it's maybe a little bit abstract, it really comes down to justice. And he actually said at the time, free market economies, are really an efficient way for us to be organized as an economy, as humans, and how we trade and do business with each other. But they can only function with strong principles of justice. And otherwise, our societies, he said, must crumble into atoms. And the book, it kind of explains that, just kind of simplifies it also with, right, okay, there are really important elements of commercial value and of creating a profit. And we should be competing on what I've called good profit drivers. So very much on better products and services. That remains important, even if you are trying to make a difference. But, at the same time, reducing prices in the supply chain to the extent that it causes and perpetuates poverty, child labor, that is not a good profit driver. That is harmful. And so it's really trying to make that distinction. But yeah, I would say the book is trying that kind of, at the end of the book, I'm trying to kind of drill a bit deeper into that, kind of underlying pillars. But the book talks a lot more about kind of simple examples as to how you can do that.
That really lays the framework. And then you spoke a little bit before about how communities in Africa can eradicate poverty and empower and accessibility to people. Could you just focus on, it's a very important point, really locally and globally, about giving people a hand up, not a handout, but a hand up.
Exactly. It's that real empowerment piece. So I would say very much an example of giving people donations. I think charity can be very important, right? I don't want to say charity isn't good. I mean, I've been there. I've worked with children, orphans in the slum, and charity can be really vital to alleviate symptoms whilst we have them. But I love this analogy, right? Imagine you're running a warm bath. As the bath is running, you walk away, you get distracted, you take a phone call, it takes longer than expected. By the time you walk back into the bathroom, it started to overflow. Well, what would you do? Really, nobody would start mopping up the floor, but forget to turn off the tap or pull the plug or both. You wouldn't do it. It wouldn't make any sense, right? But if you look at poverty, rising inequality, climate change, the plastics crisis, that's exactly what we see a lot. Initiatives that deal with the symptoms that don't turn off the tap at the same time. So if as a company, you want to do something about the plastics crisis with all the consequences for our health, we're eating, breathing, drinking 5 grams of microplastics by now each week, which is impacting our gut, even our DNA, and is linked to cancer also. We can keep scooping up plastic from the ocean and donate to initiatives to do that. And it's something that we'll need to keep doing for decades to come, even if we stopped using plastic today. But it doesn't make any sense. It's going to be a losing battle unless we stop the truckloads of plastic that are accumulating in our rivers and entering our oceans each day. And that is exactly the same with poverty. So we can keep donating to charity and keep giving people things to alleviate the symptoms, but it's not going to fix it. And it's not going to fix inequality. And who can fix it? Structurally, it's really businesses, by empowering people into jobs. And if you do that right, like the example I gave of Seed Talents, what you see is, if you tie that well in with strong commercial value at the same time, is that these people are more motivated than your average employee. It actually impacts also the productivity of the rest of the team, the pride of that team, the engagement of that team. And if you get really good at it as a company, making a difference, and you have good stories to tell, but at the same time, you're strong at your commercial value, it really does boost customer engagement with your company, customer referrals, customer loyalty, kind of 2 key drivers that underpin business growth. And that's what you see. Like even I think just one other great example there is Costco, who are very good in terms of looking after their staff and in terms of, more kind of lower senior management remuneration versus average employers. And if you look at them, their compounded growth rates are even higher than Amazon, Google, and some of the biggest companies in the world. And they are outgrowing their rival, Walmart, for example, in terms of revenue growth, again, really boosted by that customer retention, happier staff leading to better service, to more loyal customers, boosting that exceptional over 93% customer retention rate. So it can be very good for business. But again, it really depends how well you do it.
I'm going to just challenge you a little bit on the Costco Walmart thing. It's the Walmart, it's different markets that they're going for, where the Costco is higher end, shorter hours, where Walmart is going to the lower mid end, mid road, and also they're looking to, as I was supplied both and I've worked with both. And Walmart is all about saving money so people can live better. So when you take a look at, like, for example, the pay gap, when you really drive and you make it a point that, you can't really look at people flying into Davos, but you really need to take a look at the fact that the Walmart CEO makes $22 million versus the Costco CEO. My question is that really fair? I mean, in addressing the pay gap, is that just because I know how hard that job is at Walmart? I had the number 3 on my board, and I just know from firsthand how impossible the control chaos is worldwide, 365 days a year.
Okay, no, thanks. It's a good point. I mean, I think sometimes it's hard, right, to make a comparison because, like you say, they're not exactly the same. Companies not operating exactly the same context. Nevertheless, though, I think it is a good illustration of a company that is, compared to the average US company, and not just US, but we see exactly the same in the UK, same in the Netherlands, that hasn't gone along with the incredible increase of the average pay gap. And what I'm trying to illustrate with the comparison is that often the argument for the higher pay gap is that it's important for a company's success to have to the ability to attract leaders that are more talented and drive the success of the company. But so what I'm trying to illustrate with Costco is that if you're going against that trend, how successful you can be. And I'm not trying to criticize Walmart, and I'm not trying to criticize or say that people, who are running big companies shouldn't be earning well. I think absolutely, if you're in that role and you're doing a good job, you should be well remunerated for that. But does it have to be as extreme? And if we look at the growth over the last 4 or 5 decades, where we used to have a pay gap of a ratio of 1 to 30, and now it is like 1 to nearly 400, what is that based on? And if you then look at kind of Japanese counterparts or Swedish counterparts who still have a fairly lower ratio by comparison, it's not that they are performing any less, but it is having a significant impact on society. It is the key driver behind the rising inequality that we see across the world, which is, you don't need to read up many studies or listen to many prominent experts like Joseph Stiglitz, previously chief economist at the World Bank, to know that rising inequality feeds more social unrest, more polarized, divided societies, rise of populism, which is exactly what we're seeing, where we're kind of now at the same level of inequality that we were just before the Second World War. So I think it is a really important issue for business leaders to look at and realize the impact that you're having as a company by going along with that trend. And that, if anything, for the success of your company, there are real examples like Costco that show that it can be different. You don't have to go along with that trend. And still get a really good package also, by the way. It's not like, the CEO at Costco is not doing well.
Costco has embraced some of the just payments and some of the products that they sell. Could you address the just payments issue and how it is across the board using a just payment system? You think it's the best way, and how you can get globally, how you can implement it?
Yeah, I would say of all the concepts in the book, that is the most challenging one, because it's also so different from how we for decades, have been trained to think and what we're used to. So we're very much used to trading and negotiating on, right, I want to pay as little as possible to my suppliers, for example. And, if we look at the slice of the pie that can be divided within my company or within my supply chain, negotiation, is important, and more for me, less for other parties. Whereas just payments means that you pay on the principle of justice. And the essence of justice, as defined by Roman law already, centuries ago, is to render each their due. So you're really, if you and I, we build something together and we both contribute as much, we are both entitled to the same rewards. If you're putting more effort in or more talent in, you'll get more than I do, but it's still based on a principle of justice. So it's not based on, let's say, you have more power, but I put in as much as you are, but based on your power, I get 10% and you get 90%. And this is exactly what we see that has become more and more and more extreme. So if you look at supply chains, banana farmers tend to get 4% of, the price that a customer pays for all their hard work growing and harvesting the fruits. So no wonder they live in poverty, and we can give them, charitable donations. But if we would abide by the principle of justice, we would actually just pay them for their contribution. If they're contributing, let's say 20% of the final price, the final value that a customer gets, they should be paid 20%. And so there are companies now like, Hisby Supermarket in the UK, that's what they do. So when you buy from their supermarket, on your receipt, it will say that on average, suppliers get paid 67 pence out of each pound for the products that you buy from the supermarket. And it's a profitable supermarket. It's doing really well, but everyone benefits.
That's not an easy fix. Thanks for sharing that. All right, Mel, stand by. We have to stop right here. But coming up next on Sustainable Leadership and Disruptive Growth, we'll discuss how a company's values will impact talent acquisition.
80% of millennials indicate they'd even work for less salary for companies that are more aligned with their values. And so as the younger generations are becoming a bigger part of your stakeholders, your customers, your staff, but also investors, I would expect this to only become more important.
To connect with David, go to davidradlow.com. David's book set, The Principles of Cartel Disruption and Secret Stories of Leadership, Growth, and Innovation, are available wherever books are sold. This has been Sustainable Leadership and Disruptive Growth with David Radlow, a presentation of Forbes Books.